Tommy Sullivan had been coming to Yankee Stadium for 3 years, sitting in the same seat behind home plate, watching Joe DiMaggio with tears streaming down his face. The 12-year-old boy was completely deaf, but he could see the grace, the power, the perfection of Joe's swing. After every game, Tommy would wait by the player's exit, hoping for just one moment of connection with his hero. But the security guard stopped him every time. "No, kid, don't get near the players," he would shout, grabbing Tommy's arm roughly and pushing him away. Tommy couldn't hear the sounds, but he could see the man's angry face and the finger pointing to make him go away. On September 15, 1947, when the security guard pushed Tommy to the ground and yelled, "Get lost, kid," Joe DiMaggio emerged. Seeing the tears in the boy's eyes, Joe told the security guard, "Stop." What happened next changed both their lives forever. Joe didn't just sign an autograph, he didn't just take a photo, instead, he did something no other celebrity had ever done. He learned an entire language for one fan. What started with a simple hello became a 10-year friendship that proved some connections go deeper than words. September 15, 1947, 4:30 p.m. Yankee Stadium player exit. Joe DiMaggio emerged just as the security guard was pushing Tommy Sullivan to the ground. Seeing the tears in the boy's eyes and his mother's helpless expression, Joe asked, "Why are you treating this child like this?" That moment changed everything. This is the untold story of how Joe DiMaggio learned an entire language for one young fan, and how their friendship changed both their lives forever. Joe DiMaggio was used to fans. Thousands of them came to every game, screaming his name, asking for autographs, hoping for just a moment of his attention. But Tommy Sullivan was different. The 12-year-old boy never screamed. He never pushed forward aggressively like other fans. He just stood quietly at the back of the crowd, watching with tears streaming down his face. Joe had noticed the boy before, but he'd never really paid attention. There were always so many kids wanting autographs, wanting pictures, wanting a piece of the Yankee Clippers time. But on that September afternoon in 1947, something changed. Joe was walking toward the player's exit after a difficult loss to the Boston Red Sox. The team was struggling, and Joe was feeling the weight of another disappointing season. That's when he heard the commotion. "I said get back." Security guard was shouting. No kids in the player's area. Joe looked up to see a large guard grabbing a small boy by the arm. The boy was Tommy Sullivan, though Joe didn't know his name yet. "Miss, please," a woman's voice called out. "He's not trying to cause trouble. He just wants to see Joe DiMaggio." The guard wasn't listening. He pushed Tommy backward, causing the boy to stumble and fall. "I don't care what he wants," the guard snapped. "Rules are rules. No fans pass this line." Tommy hit the ground hard, scraping his knee on the concrete, but he didn't cry out in pain. He couldn't. Joe watched as the boy's mother rushed forward to help him up. "He's deaf," she explained to the guard. "He can't hear your warnings. He doesn't understand." The guard's expression didn't soften. "Deaf or not, he needs to stay back." That's when Joe DiMaggio stepped forward. "What's the problem here?" Joe asked, his voice carrying the authority of a man who'd led the Yankees to 9 World Series championships. The guard straightened up immediately. "Just keeping the fans at a safe distance, Mr. DiMaggio. This kid keeps trying to get close." Joe looked down at Tommy, who was now standing beside his mother, dirt on his clothes and tears in his eyes. But what struck Joe wasn't the boy's tears. It was his expression. Tommy was looking at Joe with complete awe and admiration. His hands were moving in quick, precise gestures. "What's he doing with his hands?" Joe asked. Tommy's mother smiled sadly. "He's trying to tell you how much he admires you. He's saying you're his hero." Joe felt something stir in his chest. He'd been called a hero before, but somehow this felt different. "He comes to every home game," the mother continued. "He saves his allowance for tickets. He sits in the same seat every time just to watch you play." Joe looked at Tommy again. The boy's hands continued moving in the graceful, flowing gestures of sign language. "What's your name?" Joe asked the mother. "I'm Margaret Sullivan. This is my son, Tommy." Joe crouched down so he was at Tommy's eye level. "Hello, Tommy," Joe said clearly, making sure the boy could read his lips. Tommy's face lit up with pure joy. His hands moved frantically in response. He's saying hello back. Margaret translated. "He's telling you this is the best day of his life." Joe felt his heart breaking and healing at the same time. Here was a boy who couldn't hear the crack of the bat, couldn't hear the roar of the crowd, couldn't hear the players calling to each other on the field. But he still loved baseball. He still came to every game. He still believed in heroes. "Mrs. Sullivan," Joe said, standing up, "would you mind if I asked you a favor?" "Of course. Anything." "Would you teach me how to say hello to Tommy in sign language?" Margaret's eyes widened. "You want to learn sign language?" "Just enough to talk to your son." Margaret looked stunned. "Mr. DiMaggio, that's very kind, but you don't have to." "I want to," Joe said firmly. For the next 10 minutes, right there outside Yankee Stadium, Margaret Sullivan taught Joe DiMaggio how to sign "Hello, Tommy, it's nice to meet you." Joe practiced the gestures over and over until he had them perfect. When he finally signed the words to Tommy, the boy's reaction was explosive. Tommy's hands flew in rapid sign language, his face beaming with excitement. He says he can't believe Joe DiMaggio is talking to him in his own language. Margaret translated, wiping away her own tears. "He says he's going to remember this moment forever." "Tell him," Joe said, "that I'm going to learn more. Tell him I want to be able to have a real conversation with him." Margaret signed Joe's words to Tommy. The boy's response needed no translation. He threw his arms around Joe's waist and held on tight. Joe DiMaggio, one of the greatest players in baseball history, stood in the parking lot of Yankee Stadium with his arms around a deaf boy who couldn't even hear his name being called. And in that moment, Joe realized something important. Being a hero wasn't about hitting home runs. It wasn't about winning championships. It wasn't about seeing your name in the newspapers. Being a hero was about making one person feel like they mattered. "Mrs. Sullivan," Joe said, "I want you to bring Tommy to every home game for the rest of the season. I'll make sure security knows you're my guests." "Mr. DiMaggio, we can't afford." "You won't need to afford anything. You're my personal guests. Tommy will have the best seats in the house." That was the beginning of the most unlikely friendship in baseball history. Over the next few weeks, Joe DiMaggio threw himself into learning sign language with the same intensity he brought to hitting curveballs. He bought books. He hired a tutor. He practiced for hours every day. His teammates thought he'd lost his mind. "What are you doing, Joe?" Phil Rizzuto asked one day, finding Joe in the clubhouse making strange gestures with his hands. "Learning to talk to a fan," Joe replied simply. "Oh, fan. Joe, you talk to fans all the time. This one's different." Joe didn't elaborate, and his teammates learned not to ask. But they noticed changes in Joe. He seemed lighter somehow, less burdened by the pressure of being the Yankees' star player. He smiled more. He joked with the younger players. He seemed to be enjoying baseball again. The reason was simple. Joe had found something more important than personal statistics. He had found purpose. Every home game, Tommy Sullivan and his mother sat in the front row behind home plate, courtesy of Joe DiMaggio, and after every game Joe would come over to the stands and have a conversation with Tommy in sign language. At first, Joe's signing was clumsy and slow, but Tommy was patient, and his mother helped translate when Joe got confused. Week by week, Joe improved. By the end of the 1947 season, Joe DiMaggio could hold a complete conversation in American Sign Language. He could ask Tommy about school, about his favorite players, about his dreams for the future. More importantly, he could understand Tommy's responses. Tommy was incredibly bright. He loved mathematics and wanted to be an engineer when he grew up. He also loved baseball with a passion that surprised even Joe. "He understands the game better than most people who can hear it." Joe told Margaret one day, "He sees things other fans miss." It was true. Tommy had an almost supernatural ability to read the game. He could predict when a runner would steal. He could tell when a pitcher was about to throw a curveball. He could spot the subtle signals between players that most fans never noticed. "It's because he has to watch everything," Margaret explained. "He can't rely on sound, so he's learned to see the game in ways hearing people never do." Joe found Tommy's insights fascinating. Before long, Joe was asking Tommy for advice about opposing pitchers and base-running strategies. "The kid's a genius," Joe told Yankees manager Bucky Harris. "We should put him on the payroll." Harris laughed, but Joe was serious. Tommy Sullivan understood baseball in ways that amazed even professional players. The friendship between Joe and Tommy became the talk of baseball. Sports writers wrote articles about the Yankees star who learned sign language for one young fan. Other players began taking notice. Some thought Joe was just doing it for publicity, but anyone who watched Joe and Tommy together could see the truth. This wasn't a publicity stunt. This was genuine friendship. Joe invited Tommy to team functions. He introduced him to other players. He made sure Tommy felt like part of the Yankees family. In return, Tommy gave Joe something no other fan ever had: honest, unbiased observations about his playing. "You're pulling your head up too quickly on your swing," Tommy signed to Joe one day after a difficult at-bat. Tommy was right. Joe had been struggling with his timing, and Tommy had spotted the problem immediately. Joe adjusted his stance based on Tommy's advice, and his hitting improved dramatically. "How does he do it?" Joe asked Margaret. "How does he see things that coaches miss?" "He watches you every single at-bat," Margaret replied. "He studies your movements like other kids study comic books." Joe was humbled by the boy's dedication. Here was a kid who couldn't hear the crack of the bat or the roar of the crowd, but who loved baseball so much he'd learned to understand it in ways that amazed professional players. Joe realized he was learning as much from Tommy as Tommy was learning from him. The 1948 season brought new challenges. Joe was dealing with injuries. The Yankees were struggling. The pressure from fans and media was intense. But through it all, Joe had his friendship with Tommy to keep him grounded. Every home game, Tommy would be in the stands, watching intently, offering encouragement through sign language. After difficult losses, Joe would find Tommy waiting by the player's exit with a simple message: "Tomorrow will be better." Tommy's optimism was infectious. Even on the worst days, when Joe was in pain from his heel injury or frustrated by poor team performance, seeing Tommy's smiling face and encouraging signs lifted his spirits. "You know what I love about Tommy?" Joe told his teammate Yogi Berra one day. "He doesn't care about my statistics. He doesn't care if I go 0 for 4. He just cares that I tried my best." Yogi nodded. "That's a good friend to have." "The best," Joe agreed. As the seasons passed, Joe and Tommy's friendship deepened. Joe attended Tommy's school events when possible. He helped Tommy with homework during long conversations in sign language. He even convinced some of his teammates to learn basic sign language so they could communicate with Tommy too. Phil Rizzuto learned to sign "How are you?" and "Great game." Yogi Berra mastered "Nice to meet you" and "Thank you." Even the gruff Casey Stengel, who became Yankees manager in 1949, learned to sign "Hello" and "Good luck." Tommy became an unofficial member of the Yankees family. But the friendship wasn't just about baseball. When Tommy's father died suddenly in 1950, Joe was at the funeral, offering comfort in sign language that needed no translation. When Tommy struggled with bullies at school, who made fun of his deafness, Joe visited Tommy's classroom and gave a talk about the importance of treating everyone with respect. "Tommy Sullivan sees the world differently than we do," Joe told the class. "But that doesn't make him less than anyone else. It makes him special. He understands things about baseball that I'm still learning, and I've been playing for 15 years. The bullying stopped. When Tommy graduated from high school in 1953, Joe DiMaggio was in the front row, applauding in sign language. Tommy had been accepted to MIT to study engineering, fulfilling the dream he'd shared with Joe years earlier. "I'm proud of you," Joe signed as Tommy walked across the stage. "You're going to do great things." Tommy's response was simple but profound. "Thank you for believing in me." Joe's playing career was winding down by then. His final season was 1951, but his friendship with Tommy continued. When Tommy started college, Joe made sure to visit whenever he could. He attended Tommy's graduation from MIT in 1957. He was there when Tommy got his first job as an engineer with a major construction company. He was there when Tommy got married in 1960 to a wonderful woman named Susan, who also communicated in sign language. Joe signed his speech at the wedding reception, bringing tears to the eyes of everyone present. "Tommy taught me that communication isn't about words," Joe signed to the assembled guests. "It's about understanding. It's about caring enough to learn someone else's language, even when it's difficult." "Tommy didn't just make me a better baseball player," Joe continued. "He made me a better person." The friendship lasted until Joe's death in 1999. Even in his final years, when Joe was ill and rarely made public appearances, he maintained his correspondence with Tommy. They wrote letters to each other every month, Tommy typing and Joe responding in his careful handwriting. Joe's final letter to Tommy was written just weeks before he died. "Dear Tommy," it said, "I want you to know that our friendship has been one of the greatest privileges of my life. You taught me that being a hero isn't about how many home runs you hit, it's about how many people you help along the way. Thank you for helping me become the man I wanted to be. Your friend always, Joe." Tommy read that letter at Joe's funeral. He signed his eulogy, as he had signed his wedding speech decades earlier. Joe DiMaggio was known as the Yankee Clipper, Tommy said through his interpreter. He was known for his 56-game hitting streak. He was known for his grace and elegance on the baseball field. But I knew him as the man who cared enough to learn my language. I knew him as the man who saw me not as a disabled kid, but as a friend worth knowing. Joe taught me that barriers are meant to be broken, that differences are meant to be celebrated, that friendship transcends any obstacle. Tommy paused, then continued in spoken words that were clear despite his deafness. Thank you, Joe, for teaching me to believe in heroes. And thank you for showing me that heroes are real. The church was silent, except for the sound of people crying. After the funeral, reporters asked Tommy about his friendship with Joe DiMaggio. People ask me what made Joe special, Tommy said through his interpreter. They want to know about his hitting streak or his World Series championships. But what made Joe special to me was simpler than that. On September 15, 1947, a security guard pushed me to the ground and told me to get lost. Joe DiMaggio saw that happen, and instead of walking away, he knelt down to my level and asked my mother to teach him how to say hello in my language. That's what made him special. That's what made him a hero. Not his baseball statistics, but his heart. Tommy Sullivan continued working as an engineer for 40 years after college. He designed bridges and buildings that still stand today. But his most important work was founding the Joe DiMaggio Foundation for Deaf Youth in 2000, 1 year after Joe's death. The foundation provides scholarships for deaf students, pursuing careers in engineering, education, and sports. It also promotes sign language education in schools and communities. To date, the foundation has helped over 500 deaf students achieve their educational dreams. Every scholarship recipient receives a letter that Tommy wrote personally. Joe DiMaggio taught me that communication is about more than words. It's about caring enough to understand someone else's world. I hope you'll use your education to help others understand yours. In 2010, the Yankees honored both Joe DiMaggio and Tommy Sullivan with a special ceremony. Tommy, now 75 years old, threw out the first pitch. As he walked to the mound, the entire stadium gave him a standing ovation. Tommy couldn't hear the applause, but he could feel it. He could see 50,000 people on their feet, clapping and cheering for a deaf boy who became friends with a baseball legend. Before he threw the pitch, Tommy looked up at the sky and signed a simple message. "This one's for you, Joe." The pitch was perfect. After the ceremony, a young reporter asked Tommy what he thought Joe DiMaggio would say about the foundation and all the students it had helped. Tommy smiled and answered in sign language, which his interpreter voiced for the crowd. Joe would say that this is what heroes do. They use their gifts to help others find theirs. But I think Joe would also say that he wasn't the hero in our story. He'd say the real heroes are the teachers learning sign language, the students overcoming obstacles, and the families who never stop believing in their children. Joe always said that being a hero isn't about being perfect. It's about caring enough to try. The story of Joe DiMaggio and Tommy Sullivan shows us that greatness isn't measured in statistics. It's measured in the lives you touch, the barriers you break, and the friendships you build along the way. It shows us that communication is about more than words. It's about understanding. It's about respect. It's about caring enough to learn someone else's language, even when it's difficult. Most importantly, it shows us that heroes are real. They're not perfect. They don't always hit home runs or win championships. But when they see someone who needs help, they kneel down to their level and ask how they can make things better. Today, the Joe DiMaggio Foundation for Deaf Youth continues Tommy's work. Every year, the foundation awards the September 15th scholarship to deserving deaf students. The scholarship is named after the date when Joe first learned to say hello in sign language. Recipients receive not just money for education, but also mentorship and support throughout their academic careers. Many of these students go on to become teachers, engineers, doctors, and even professional athletes. All of them carry forward the lesson that Joe and Tommy taught, that differences make us stronger, not weaker. The foundation also operates the DiMaggio Sullivan Communication Center in New York. The center teaches sign language to families, coaches, and community members. Over 10,000 people have learned basic sign language through the center's programs. Many of these graduates go on to become teachers, coaches, and advocates for the deaf community. The center's motto, inspired by Joe and Tommy's friendship, is simple: communication starts with caring. Every classroom in the center displays a photo of Joe DiMaggio kneeling beside Tommy Sullivan, both of them signing hello to each other. Below the photo is a quote from Joe: "The best conversations happen when you speak someone else's language." In Tommy's final interview before his death in 2015, he was asked what he wanted people to remember about his friendship with Joe DiMaggio. "I want them to remember that it started with hello." Tommy signed, just a simple hello. Joe could have signed one autograph and walked away. Instead, he took the time to learn my language. That's the difference between being famous and being great. Famous people give you what's easy. Great people give you what you need. Tommy Sullivan died peacefully in his sleep at age 80, surrounded by his children and grandchildren. All of them knew sign language. All of them knew the story of their grandfather and Joe DiMaggio. His family continues the foundation's work today. His daughter Maria serves as executive director. His son Joseph, named after Joe DiMaggio, teaches sign language at the Communication Center. All of Tommy's grandchildren volunteer for the foundation during summer breaks. They've inherited their grandfather's belief that communication can change the world. At Tommy's funeral, his grandson read a letter that Joe had written to Tommy in 1995, on the 48th anniversary of their first meeting. "Dear Tommy, every September 15th, I think about that day when you changed my life. You taught me that being a hero isn't about what you accomplish for yourself, it's about what you make possible for others. Thank you for making me a better man. Your friend always, Joe DiMaggio." The letter became the foundation's mission statement. Every scholar who receives help from the foundation gets a copy. They're reminded that their education isn't just about their own success, it's about what they'll make possible for the next generation. The legacy of Joe and Tommy's friendship extends far beyond baseball. Schools across America now teach about their story in diversity and inclusion classes. Teachers use their friendship as an example of how barriers can become bridges. Students learn that differences aren't obstacles to overcome, but gifts to celebrate. The Yankees organization has honored their memory in multiple ways. Every September 15th, the team observes Communication Day at Yankee Stadium. Sign language interpreters are provided for all fans who need them. Players wear special patches honoring Joe and Tommy's friendship. Before each Communication Day game, a moment of silence is observed. During this moment, fans throughout the stadium sign hello together. It's a powerful reminder that some words transcend sound. The tradition has spread to other teams and other sports. Dozens of professional teams now have annual Communication Days. Thousands of fans have learned basic sign language through these events. The impact continues to grow, year after year. In 2020, Major League Baseball officially recognized September 15th as DiMaggio-Sullivan Friendship Day. The announcement was made in both spoken English and American Sign Language. For the first time in baseball history, a league-wide announcement was fully accessible to deaf fans. It was a moment Tommy would have loved. September 15th, 1947. The day Joe DiMaggio learned to say hello in sign language. The day of friendship began that would last 52 years and inspire thousands of people. The day that proved some connections go deeper than words. If this story of friendship and breaking barriers moved you, subscribe for more heartwarming sports stories. Hit that like button if you believe heroes are made by how they treat others, and comment below, what would you have done in Joe's situation? Next week we'll share another story about athletes who used their fame to change lives. The secret good deed that Mickey Mantle kept hidden for 30 years. Remember, you don't have to be famous to be someone's hero, you just have to care enough to try.